We are delivering today the iPad, the new iMac, the iPod, iPhoto, MacBook Air, iTunes. It's a revolutionary moment.
He's one of the most creative and daring CEOs. A global icon who has shaped the worlds of technology and media. His products are adored by millions. The company he started in a garage is worth more than $200 billion today.
It's an incredible talent he has for getting people to hear what he says and get excited about it.
For over 30 years, computers, music, movies, and mobile phones have all been transformed by Apple's Steve Jobs. He's been called a brilliant visionary.
He's the Thomas Edison of our time.
And an egocentric bully.
He drove them overly hard at certain times. Some of them just wound up just quitting in disgust. Some of them wound up saying they'd never work for Steve again.
Few executives in history have suffered such painful setbacks.
It looked like Jobs was washed up, was a total has-been.
Or as much success.
Steve, I love you!
And Steve came back and began what I think is the greatest turnaround in the history of corporate America.
One of the challenges of understanding Steve Jobs is that he has a different operating system from mere mortals. So mere mortals trying to understand what goes on in Steve Jobs' brain, it would be like explaining to a fish what it is to fly.
Yeah, he's a fascinating bundle of contradictions. So influential, yet so secretive. He's incomparable. There's no one like him.
A very remarkable man, extremely smart. A spellbinding, mesmerizing leader of people.
Jobs went from having nearly blown this amazing fortune and bankrupted himself to rising as a billionaire with a brilliant future.
Jobs' rise to technology superstar propelled him into the public eye at a young age.
What a computer is to me is it's the most remarkable tool that we've ever come up with. And it's the equivalent of a bicycle for our minds.
The iPod Mini.
But while he'll take center stage to introduce new products, he shuns the spotlight when it's turned on him. He declined to participate in this program. It's a secrecy that has only served to deepen the mystery of what makes him tick.
Because he's such a polarizing character, we have a tendency to try to freeze him and say, he's like this, when in fact, he's changed a lot.
Jobs is a true son of Silicon Valley. Born in 1955 in San Francisco, he was raised in its freewheeling culture of experimentation and innovation. Alan Deutschman is an author who has written extensively about Jobs and Apple.
Steve Jobs, from going back to when he was a teenager, was very influenced by the 1960s, 1970s counterculture. He loved the Beatles, he loved Bob Dylan.
He enrolled in Oregon's Reed College, but dropped out his freshman year. Daniel Kotke was a college friend of Jobs.
I think by the time he was a freshman in college, Steve already had a sense that there were great opportunities in the world and that he wasn't really going to need his college credits.
Robert X. Cringely was Apple Computer employee number 12.
When I met him, he was, I think, 19 years old. He had hair down to his waist, and he only ate fruit. And he was, clearly a hippie.
When Jobs returned to his childhood home in California, he became interested in what was then an entirely new concept, the personal computer. A revolution was brewing in this hall rented from Stanford University. A group of eccentric enthusiasts and inventors called themselves the Homebrew Computer Club. They were about to ignite a new industry. Jobs joined meetings with a man who would become his partner in founding Apple Computer, Steve Wozniak.
People were getting up, these computers are going to revolutionize life. And I felt like, oh my God, I'm a part of this huge revolution that we're talking about. Everybody's going to have a computer in the home, and nobody in the outside world believes us.
Steve Wozniak was the engineering genius, Jobs, the product impresario.
He really wanted to make something in life. I don't, to this day, know a lot of what drove him that way, but He really wanted to have a company and a success. Projects that I would design and build very frequently, Steve would say he knew how to sell it.
Jobs' family lived in this Los Altos neighborhood. He and Wozniak took time off their day jobs to set up shop in the family garage.
We didn't have a telephone to phone the computer stores in the garage. That was in Steve's bedroom.
The team's first computer, the Apple I. It was a circuit board that users would generally build into a makeshift wooden box. As the tech industry in Silicon Valley took off, Jobs saw opportunity.
The penalty for failure for going and trying to start a company in this valley is non-existent. There really isn't a penalty for failure either psychologically or economically, in the sense that if you have a good idea and you go out to start your own company, even if you fail, you're generally considered worth more to the company you left because you've gained all this valuable experience in many disciplines.
To bring their ideas to life, the Apple team needed capital. Jobs convinced angel investor Mike Markkula to invest around $90,000 and a line of credit in the fledgling company. In exchange, Markkula got 1/3 ownership and started a 20-year career with Apple Computer. It was exactly what they needed to create their new computer, the Apple II. It became the first highly successful, mass-produced personal computer.
What was revolutionary about the Apple II was its use of color, the fact it had a built-in keyboard, and it was the first one to look like a consumer device. And so it was a huge success. You know, it was an astounding success right from the beginning.
At 23, Jobs and the Apple team were soon making more money than they knew what to do with.
Steve came to me one day and he said, "You realize our stock is worth more than our parents have made in their lifetime." And I was stunned. What the heck? How can you have so much? And then 6 months later, you have 10 times more.
They were the stars of Silicon Valley and the cover boys for a new industry. Michael Moritz is a former Time magazine reporter and a legendary Silicon Valley venture capitalist.
Inevitably, these companies aren't really companies at the beginning. They're a product.
The next question was, where do they go from here?
Steve was always worried about competition from companies like IBM and everybody else in the world, and how are we going to avoid them? And you've got to stay out in the technology lead.
There's always that sense of anxiety and tension associated with the question, how can we possibly follow this?
In 1979, after a stock deal worth an undisclosed amount, Steve Jobs was allowed access to what was known as the treasure trove of Silicon Valley. It was Xerox PARC, the company's famed research and development laboratory. Jobs and his team saw the future here, the way computers would be used, including the use of graphics and a small device that had not yet been revealed to the outside world, a mouse.
He saw it. He was just blown away. He thought, well, this is the future of computing. So he went back to Apple and grabbed people who he worked with there and said, you've got to see this.
And you'd see 2 programs at once, and I was stunned. And you'd see 3 programs at once, and I thought, oh my God, once you have this machine, you're never going to want to go back. It's a one-way door. Your computers are going to be this way, and you'll never go back.
Leander Caney is the editor of the blog Cult of Mac and the author of the book Inside Steve's Brain.
Xerox had invented the entire paradigm of modern computing, but they had no idea what they were sitting on.
But Jobs did. He wanted to bring the graphical user interface to Apple Computer. But first, he had to deal with a power shift going on inside Apple. Although Jobs was the founder and creative force of Apple, the Apple board of directors wanted an experienced executive to be president of the company. Jobs interviewed dozens of candidates before he focused on someone from outside the tech world, Pepsi CEO John Sculley.
I wasn't really interested in joining Apple or being the CEO of Apple. I thought I was highly unqualified. But Steve, in those days, he had long black hair and very piercing palmetto berry eyes. He looked down at his running shoes, and then he looked up at me. And he said, "Do you want to sell sugar water for the rest of your life? Or do you want to come with me and change the world?" And it was like someone just knocked the wind out of my stomach. So he does have this incredible charismatic way of picking exactly the right thing to say at exactly the right moment and inspiring people like no one I've ever seen before. A few weeks later, I was working at Apple.
For Apple Computer